Welcome back to a special episode of the Cash Compound podcast. I am JDew, and today we have got a guest, Ms. Robin Washington. And we're going to chat with her a little bit here and get her financial journey and story, and maybe we'll be able to extract those secrets. Everybody knows success leaves clues. And this woman is very successful in what she's been doing because she figured out the secrets, ladies and gentlemen. So, Ms. Robin, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, JD, for inviting me.
Yes, ma'am. Well, we connected because of Tony. Now, Tony's in a previous episode. If you haven't listened to that one, it's a great big time. I had a lot of laughs on that one. We hope that you will too. And this young lady here is his aunt, and the reason he's semi-financially successful. Can I say that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. She said, I am exactly that reason. Okay. Very good. Well, we want to meet you for a little bit here. So on this podcast, that that what we talk about and what we interview folks about when we have those special guests are their financial journey and how it all started for you. So tell us about some of the things before we get into the crux of the matter. Tell us about yourself and how you grew up and how you grew up with the mindset of money.
Well, I actually come from a background of just my sister and I, and my dad, who kind of delved into the entrepreneurial space. So I kind of grew up. I even remember as a little girl, my favorite games was playing like grocery store, or, we had a little snow cone machine, or, and I remember working in my uncle's laundry. He had a laundromat and a record store. And I always just loved business, though I didn't know it at that time, that probably was a place where, I just believe God just put that little DNA in me. But, pretty much went to school. That was not my background, business. My background was actually electronics. Went through college and went into, the electronic field, if you will. So I didn't really get back into the business arena until I actually went back to college for economics. And that's when I kind of, started, I guess you could say, putting my toe in, the entrepreneurial space, just really because I wanted to see if I can use some of the knowledge that I was gaining in college at the time. But, I was married by then. I had one child by then. And, just kind of started working a little home-based business, if you will. And that really just kind of started opening, my eyes in the entrepreneurial world. A book that really just kind of, I would say really kind of catapulted me was the book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And my husband and I actually read that together. And that really just kind of opened our eyes. And I guess you can say, really pushed us into the entrepreneurial space.
Okay, so my question now comes in the form of that partnership and relationship you had with your husband. How were you guys as a couple prior to something as transformative that many people, including myself, read maybe on day one of their education of economics and finances on a personal level? So what was life before? Why'd you guys get into that book? How did things start to shift?
Very interesting. That's a good question. My husband and I, we initially were not necessarily on the same path, meaning that he grew up a little different journey. He kind of grew up in the real estate space with his dad. I did not. And one of the things we started talking about was buying, moving and buying another house. And I think that's really where I kind of realized, like, hey, we don't really know anything. So we need to learn something. We need to begin to educate ourselves. And I remembered this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that a friend had told me about. And so I all I can say is just God led me. And I just remember going to the bookstore and picking up this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and coming home and telling my husband, I said, look, if we're going to start making financial decisions, we need to educate ourselves, So let's start by reading this book. And I'll never forget, he kind of rolled his eyes like, oh, brother, and I just said, hey, do me a favor, just let's read two chapters, because they're not long chapters. I said, let's just read two chapters, and after that, if you don't want to read anymore, that's fine, And so he agreed to the two chapters, and we read two chapters together. We sat down together and read together. And then I remember after those two chapters, I closed the book and I told my husband, well, hey, I thank you very much for, keeping up your end of the agreement, and I won't push anymore. But he turned around and said to me, that was kind of interesting. Let's read another chapter, And
Oh,
so,
hmm.
so it piqued his interest. And, before we knew it, over, I'd probably say a week or two, we ended up finishing the entire book. And from there, I went on to several seminars that Robert Kiyosaki had. Went to a couple of his, like 3-day courses, and ended up coming back home with the Cashflow game. And so we started playing Cashflow I had two boys by this time. We started playing Cashflow with the boys, and it just kind of opened the door for my entire family having that
Love it.
entrepreneurial mindset.
It's so interesting to me because I have a similar journey in my senior year of college where I got my hands on that book as well, Rich
Mm-hmm.
Dad Poor Dad, and I borrowed it from a business owner who I worked for. So I was kind of a personal assistant in some ways to some of his business operations. And it started to blow my mind. And it's interesting to me that you both got into a loving family relationship and some sort of equilibrium on how your partnership worked, but this was a complete mental shift, obviously. And it seems like you were kind of leading that charge. And
Yes.
so I met my wife, for instance, after I had already had some of those foundations
Okay.
um, met. So I just have a different journey there. So very interesting to me. So
Mm-hmm.
now, what type of business is he doing when you're going off to all the seminars trying to learn about maybe real estate or some other things? Like, what was kind of the time frame here and in the maturation of kind of the germination point?
I it was about 19, I'm going to say 1996, 97 time frame when we kind of crossed paths with Robert Kiyosaki. And
Okay, so early in his journey of the books, I believe he
yes,
was brand new in the book space at that point.
yeah, it was early in his journey, and I remember that I'm more of the researcher between the two of us, so I do a lot of digging and researching. And I remember that Robert Kiyosaki was going to be holding his first kind of like 3-day seminar in Arizona. I remember it was going to be like $3,000 to go, but it sounded so good, and I just wanted, I was just hungry at that time. But the beauty of that is right before that particular 3-day event, he happened to be in the San Francisco area. And so we got a chance, my husband and I, and another couple, to go see him. And after that, my husband, agreed to just let me go to the 3-day seminar. And so he kind of held down the fort, and he allowed me to go and discover it. And I kid you not, I came home, my mind was blown.
Right.
You really begin to understand what you don't know, the things that you don't know. And it was such a great experience, for me. And coming home and kind of sharing that with my husband, was really such a wonderful journey. And then, from there, we really kind of got into the real estate space. We got into the network marketing space. He's in the stock market space, so we've just kind of ventured out into the various areas of, the entrepreneurial space, and have been entrepreneurs ever since. So
Gotcha. Yeah. So what you're doing now and why we cross paths is because we both heard about the truth behind this one particular tool, a tool that had
right,
always been there and available to us, but I had never heard much about. And when I did hear, it wasn't necessarily positive, and it wasn't about wealth building. It was
right,
about protection. It was
right.
always about protection. That was it. So when you first got introduced to what we now know as the infinite banking concept, how did that go down? And was there now a new set of experiences that kind of had to lead you to
Yes,
your awakening?
yes. Okay, so again, remember, I'm more of the researcher. I love to learn things. And one of the things that I love to do is go to a lot of different investment type seminars. And this particular one, and I love going to the free things, because at least if I can get one nugget, that just puts me one more step, closer to my goals. So I went to one of these investment seminars, and it was an investment seminar that had a variety of different investment ideas. And after this seminar, I remember filling out some form, and I don't know, maybe a couple weeks later, we get this call from a lady, and she begins to kind of share the concept of infinite banking. I didn't completely understand it, but my husband actually was able to connect or understand. He grasped it faster than I did,
Okay.
um, but only because prior to this, we had the experience of borrowing from our 401, his 401k, to purchase our truck, and then paying that back basically. And so he kind of got, he understood that this was kind of along that same line. But the more we delved into it, the more that, I really saw the power of it. We learn, if you will, insurance just from, you know, a death benefit perspective, never from a living benefit perspective. And
Right.
that's
Right.
that's really what kind of, turned us around, and really got us involved in the infinite banking space. But it's amazing when you just allow yourself to be open to learn, and how the information begins to manifest itself. And that's really what happened with my husband and I. And so we connected with the team out in the Kansas area, and they began to mentor us,
Yeah.
and show us how the infinite banking concept works.
So when was this? Give us a range of time here. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly, this may have been around the time that the world economy started to kind of shrink and crunch. So give us kind of what you were doing or learning and the infancy stage at the same time friends and family may have been scrambling.
Oh yeah. This was around 2006, 2007, I'm going to say,
Hmm.
when
Right.
we actually connected. And then really, it was so interesting, because I didn't understand it, but I knew I could hear the wisdom of it. And so it was about that time frame where my husband and I both started our first policies. And it's been a blessing ever since. We have kind of grown from that time period of 2000. Yeah, it's about
Right.
2006, 2007.
Love to hear it. So now you've made a transition from what you were doing into actually teaching this concept to people. Over the last set of years, maybe a
Yeah,
dozen, you have been helping other people implement this in their lives. Now,
right.
it's a completely different mindset, I would imagine, from selling insurance. It's more of an
Mhm.
educational
It is.
experience for the client and customer, and a journey with their actual agent as opposed to a transaction, right? It's a
Exactly.
relationship and all that. So help me understand how someone like yourself chats with family and friends about this. How do you do it? Because everyone else, like us, weren't at a place where we understood that this worked, what it could do, how the product actually functioned. So, how many fights did you get in with family before Tony? That's what I want to know.
Oh, actually, quite a few. One of the things when we were shown the infinite banking concept, honestly, I got angry, because why didn't someone teach us this? Why didn't my parents know? Or, how come this couldn't have been something to pass on? Why are we always having fish fry dinners and chicken dinners,
Yep, I
when
know.
it's time for somebody to go home? So I actually got involved in teaching other people about the infinite banking concept because I got mad that nobody was teaching us, nobody taught us.
Yes.
And so I wanted to share with people of the concept. And it's not an easy concept, meaning that we've all been taught a certain way to operate when it comes to our money. And so, we know how to work for it and we know how to spend it, but we don't know how to get money to work for us instead of us working for money. And, and that's the thing, that the educational piece is teaching people, helping people to understand that life insurance, the death benefit is the cherry on top, but it's the living benefit, that the opportunity to be the primary beneficiary of your policy while you're alive, and then the cherry on top is once you go home, there's a legacy to pass to, your loved ones. But the goal of the infinite banking concept is to recapture the money, to get back in control of the dollars that you kind of let go out of your hand, because at the end of the day, we finance everything, all the time, and every time we do that, we allow money to leave our hands. And one of the things that I tell people is when that dollar leaves your hands, it stops working for you and it starts working for somebody else. The key is to keep the dollar under your control and working for you. So having those kinds of conversations are not, how do I say, they're not easy conversations because we've been so conditioned to think one way.
Right.
Me personally, one of my main things is that I always want to know what do the wealthy do? How do they make their money? I might not have as many zeros behind my dollar, my $1, you know, but I can do the same tools and use the same tools to do the same thing that they do, and that is to grow their wealth. So it's doing the right things with your money, and those are the kind of conversations that, I have with family members, friends, clients, and helping them to understand there's a way to operate with the dollar in order for the dollar to work for you, so you aren't always having to work for the dollar. But it's I will tell you, it's not a slam dunk. It takes
Right.
immediate
Right.
to that
Yeah, I
place.
love what you said, though. There's ways to make sure that we're not only working for the dollars, but the dollars are working for us. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's a complete mind shift for most people who
Yeah.
have jobs and generally a booming American Western economy. That it's been traditionally, we just work hard, right? And if you work harder, you'll get promoted to a place where maybe the dollars can uh, they can kind of out earn you can out earn your
Mhm,
spending
mhm,
habits, right? But
mhm.
that's not really what happens. So here's one question I have about technically with the policies that you have today: true or false, over the course of this time you have one or more whole
Mhm,
life insurance policies from mutual companies, and they actually grow and there's more cash all the
mhm,
time. We got to
mhm.
know, is that true?
Yes. Yes.
See, love to hear it. Okay, love to hear it. Some people
Yes.
don't believe me. Ms. Robin, you got to understand that people are out here just trolling us sometimes in these comments, or not believing it, or having a hard time sharing it with their family or friends because they don't see it, or
Well,
they don't think it's true.
here's one of the things that, again, I always say, pay attention to the wealthy. Where do the wealthy put their money? And if whole life insurance contracts weren't all that in a bag of chips, so to speak, why is it that there's billions of dollars sitting inside whole life insurance contracts? Why do companies and corporations have money sitting inside those contracts if they weren't worth the paper that they're written on?
Right.
But yes, for me personally, my entire family, my kids have policies, and they're older, they're your age. My kids have policies. My dad has policies, my mom has policies, my grandkids have we have. So I walk what I taught. I believe in what I do, and I use my policies every day. Literally, I use my policies to operate our financial affairs. So yes, it works.
Love it. Love to hear it. So you've also transitioned in more recent years to being an actual advisor for other folks. And I know
Mhm.
that we have talked a little bit about who you help and how you help. But I want to know, what does an average infinite banking client look like? Sometimes when we're posed with that questions from our friends or family or potential new customers who want to ask us questions about policies that they own or things they don't understand, they're like, who does this? Who can do this? How much money do you have for this? Or, what's a good premium to actually do? Like, I don't want to do a bad premium. What's a good premium? So tell me about your clients.
Basically, my clients range. I have the young people, and I love my young people. So like the 20s and 30-year olds.
All right.
And I've got the senior citizens, that are 70, 80-year olds. Everybody is going to be at a different place, and the premiums, I base those premiums based upon what are what is the budget, what is it that we're working with. We're going to start, because like I always tell my clients, we can always add more policies as your income grows, but let's start where you're at. So we're going to start working in the budget that they have. We're not going to, my goal is to redirect dollars that you already have moving away from you. So it's not necessarily having to come up with new dollars,
Yep.
but
Yep.
just redirecting those dollars back to you to start working for you. So the age range, it doesn't really, I don't really have, like I said, I've got the gamut. Premium dollars, if we're starting with young people, it might just be a couple of $100, a month or something like that, to I've got a client that literally his premiums are $50,000 a year, so it just depends on the person and where they're at financially and where they want to go, and then we just grow from there.
Very good. So tell me about how you continue to educate folks once they begin. How do you kind of
Hmm.
work alongside them? I think a lot of people out there are willing to hear something like this on a podcast, on YouTube, and then they go out and try to find the right person who can help them. And they're not
Right.
calling you. And they're not calling me potentially. And we're saying, well, we can help, but they're thinking, man, they might be busy. They might not be right for me. So they go try to educate an agent on this. In your tenure of doing
Yeah.
this, do people know about that? Are agents out there educating on this? Are agents out there helping people after they begin? Tell us what you've seen.
Now, I will tell you, not not all agents are equal. Let me just put it that way. Not all agents are equal. You're going to have agents that understand infinite banking because they train themselves in it. They actually live it. In other words, they themselves have their own policies and they're doing banking. I've worked for large insurance agent companies, and they're not necessarily going to teach agents on the infinite banking platform. So you do need to know. the agent that you're talking with, that they understand the infinite banking concept, and more importantly, that they're doing it themselves, because that's how you know you really got a good agent, is if they do it themselves, and they really believe in it. So my recommendation is always, ask the agent, most agents shouldn't have a problem with, hey, let me see your policy, let me see what you've done, for
Yeah.
yourself, because I always say, a bad salesperson is somebody who tries to sell you something that they themselves don't don't use, so you always want to look for that agent that is, trained in the infinite banking space.
Okay. So, one last question. You had the privilege of actually meeting the founder of the concept himself. So,
Mhm.
Nelson Nash, he
Yes.
obviously has been gone from us for about 4 years and
Mhm.
graduated, as he always said, right?
Mhm.
Graduated
Exactly.
onto the next life. But you got to spend time at the master's feet here. So tell
Yes.
us what we need to know, because we want some of that wisdom and some of that practice and some of that knowledge to spill over on our listeners and me personally today. So tell us what you remember about Nelson.
Nelson was a humble man, in my opinion. My husband and I actually got the opportunity to go to Hawaii, and it was kind of like a I'm going to say it was like a family a retreat in Hawaii with Nelson Nash and the people that mentored us out in the Kansas area. So we got to spend time with him, and he really is a humble man. He really is one that believed in the life insurance and really learned it. He always said it was God that showed him when he was in a time of need financially. So he definitely and tirelessly would teach. He would teach. I went to several of his seminars in Birmingham, and it was just he was just a man that really gave his time and energy to help others understand the power of the life insurance policy and how to use that policy as a living benefit. The thing that I would really say is he really just imparted the importance of using the policy, and that the policy had infinite possibilities. I mean, there wasn't, we would ask, well, can you use it for this, or can you use it for that, or and it was infinite. If you can think of it, you can use your policy to accomplish your goals. So to me, he was just that's the thing that stood out to me most, was just his humbleness. He was just really, really a humble man, really sweet man.
Very nice. Well, Robin, thank you so much for spending some time with us here, and letting us grill you about your journey. We're so thankful that our paths crossed. And thank you to Tony, your nephew, who
Yes.
made that connection for us. He was right. He was very much right. And maybe we're going to chat a little bit more about teaming up so we can keep spreading this news and this gospel of
Mhm.
truth with finances and money to more people. And we can really change a lot more family trees, just like you've changed yours by spreading
Yes.
this to your parents, children, and even wider net than that. So thank you so much for being on our podcast. We'll talk again soon.
Take care. Thank you.